Have you thought about taking out a Parent Plus loan to fund your child's college education? Well, here to talk with me about this is Becca Craig from Buckingham Strategic Wealth. Becca, welcome.
Hi, Bob. Thanks for having me.
A
Glad to be
pleasure to
here.
have you back, and a pleasure to have
Yeah.
you talk about a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I just had my daughter graduate from college and have long thought about,
Congratulations
yep, thank you
to
so much.
you
And
and her, but you as well.
well, and her, because not only did she graduate, but she has a job to go to. So even better yet.
That
So,
is huge. That's a
yeah.
big deal.
So many other parents, I looked at Parent Plus loans. You wrote an article about this for Retirement Daily. Where you going to have you walk us through it?
Absolutely. No, thanks again for having me because it is a very timely conversation, both for parents and families that currently have Parent Plus loans and also for the entering class of 2025, that this is right around the time that's a very exciting time that students in high school are making their decisions and given their acceptance letters. And at the same time, it's also a time to consider how to pay for a college education or any type of post high school education. And you know there's a ton of legislation both being drafted, considered, even passed that will affect how college is funded both from the family side, but also the amount of aid that's given. And so really what the catalyst of this article and why I wanted to write it and make sure that people are informed about their choices, especially when it comes to financing college, is because little known fact that in the COVID-19 relief bill, there was a huge change to the way that the expected family contribution is calculated. In fact, they wiped it. So they replaced it with the student aid index. And a lot of critics are saying that this will really impact families that have multiple students in college, middle income, high income earners, that they will not be receiving as much aid. And so families might be looking to alternative ways to fund college other than federal grants and federal aid. And it's important for families and parents specifically that they study up on the ins and outs of Parent Plus loans, because it's a major financial decision. And as we'll go through, really the ins and outs of the Parent Plus loans, there are situations where it can be beneficial, and there are situations where you might want to consider alternative options first. That shouldn't be your first line of defense. Parent Plus loans are borrowed and taken out by parents, as you would assume, on behalf of the student, up to the full cost of attendance minus any aid that they might have already received. Unlike your typical student loan, it requires a credit check, and also an origination fee of about 4.2%. So that's kind of baked into the principal loan. Um, Unlike student loans, Parent Plus loans actually require immediate repayment. You can defer them while your student's in college, but the interest continues to accrue. And so borrowers who took out new Parent Plus loans after July 1st, 2020, or considering doing so before the June 30th cutoff, will receive a historically low interest rate of 5.3%, which is down 2% from the average. Average Parent Plus loan interest rate is about 7.25%. So this interest rate is adjusted yearly on new loans taken. It is not adjusted yearly for loans that have already been taken out. Very key and important factor. It's a fixed rate for the entirety of the loan. While a lot of parents might be tempted to refinance to a private lending option, either in their own name or the name of their child, I would really urge parents to look at alternative options of even how they structure their repayment plan before refinancing, mainly because the protections of like the payment suspension during the pandemic and income-based repayment plans, those go away with private loans. And so especially considering that we have the continued suspension of payments, to look at that moving forward. Federal loans cannot be transferred to the student. So if you have a Parent Plus loan, it cannot be taken from parent and given to a student under the federal decree. It has to be refinanced into a private loan once the student meets qualifications. And that can be credit, that can be other types of employment related factors. And so it's kind of like once you buy it, keep it. And so parents should be wary, buyer beware of, if this is taken out in your name, a Parent Plus loan, it is yours for the entirety unless you refinance to a private loan. Also, when Parent Plus loans are consolidated, or let's say your student graduates and you're like, how do I repay this in a timely manner as opposed to the standard repayment plan? Unlike student loans that have over 4 different types of income-driven repayment plans, the Parent Plus loans only allow for you to pay with a income contingent repayment plan, which, because of the way they calculate what you actually owe based on that repayment plan, it's one of the more expensive, or you'll pay a higher monthly payment than you would maybe one of the other income-based loans. So all very key factors.
Right. So
Consider.
oftentimes parents and students with respect to their loans are always thinking about forgiveness if they do end up in some sort of financial trouble. What do folks need to know about that?
Thank you. That is, we get a lot of questions about that from clients and individuals that read the articles, that there are strict requirements that need to be met for Parent Plus loans to be forgiven in their entirety. If a student or the borrower passes away, the loan is forgiven. In cases of certain bankruptcy, or if the college becomes null and void, like you went to a college and it no longer exists. So very few circumstances that it can be forgiven outright. That being said, there is one situation that it does make sense for a parent to consider a Parent Plus loan, and that is if the parent qualifies for public service loan forgiveness based on their employer. So if a parent works for the government, or a hospital system, or one of the other 14 different types of qualifying employers, that they can consolidate their Parent Plus loan into a federal direct consolidation loan. There's another article that I write that's all about public service loan forgiveness and how to qualify. But should the parent work for a qualifying employer, they can receive public service loan forgiveness after 10 years, 120 payments on an income-based repayment plan under that stipulation. The student cannot. So if the student works for an employer that would qualify, but it's a Parent Plus loan under the parent's name, that cannot receive forgiveness. And so if a student is going into the public sector that would potentially qualify for public service loan forgiveness, parents are urged to really think about, we all want to do what's best for our kids, for our families. And the best thing for our families is to really consider, what are my options for repayment? What are my options for forgiveness? And if a student's going to enter the public sector, and receive forgiveness, it's probably in the parents' best interest to look at how to structure those loans so that the entire family can stay afloat, as opposed to being burdened with hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loan debt, because that is not good for anybody.
So in the article, you mentioned other alternative options that folks might have to finance college, and compared to, say, the Parent Plus loan. Any thoughts about that?
Absolutely. That if a dependent is currently pursuing higher education, there's nothing wrong. And actually, I strongly encourage parents and guardians to call the school's financial aid office to talk about your financial aid package for next year. That things have changed dramatically in the past year, let alone the last 6 months, when it comes to financial aid and financing options. There's entire departments of people that are dedicated to answering those questions and being able to work with families to ensure that the best outcome happens for that student and financing that college education. Also that there are various forms of merit-based aid or work study programs that, while it's really enticing to have a quick fix, and it's like a very, very simple checkbox, click here, Parent Plus loan, consider all of your options before turning to Parent Plus loans. And again, there's no good, there's no bad, there's just optimal. And it's optimal in certain cases, like forgiveness through PSLF. And in other cases, it's not as optimal. So again, there's no good, there's no bad, but just equip yourself with the information, your options, and the alternatives, so that the college education process is one that's full of excitement and joy, and not dread and fear. Right. That's no fun for anyone.
Right. And so when I think about FAIR, and I think about the current statistics, Becca, around the percent of older Americans who have now Parent Plus loans, and the harm that we know that debt has in terms of being on retirement's doorstep, or even in retirement, and the burden that it places on folks that are weighed down by that that debt. It's really something that they should consider long and hard before they take on that burden.
Absolutely. That time horizon, in financial planning, that's a very valid and real consideration of when will my goals need to be funded and what are the absolutes that need to be met. And so, to work with your financial advisor, to work with your financial planning team, that, these are important conversations to be had. And the wild, wild west that is student loans has really become, for a lot of planners, the forefront of conversations. And so if someone's financial planner hasn't brought it up, you should bring it up. I'd encourage you to ask and seek for that information because it's all about education. And in the same vein, it's education about what are my options for education. Absolutely.
Well, Becca, as you know, it's a pleasure chatting with you. It's a pleasure having you write for Retirement Daily. You've helped a great many people with your articles and videos.
Thank you, Bob. It's a pleasure being here. I enjoy it. Thank you for having me.